Because of the following special program, Knots Landing was presented at an earlier time tonight. Knots Landing will return at this time next Thursday.
If you ask Americans who our greatest enemy is, they would probably tell you the Soviet Union. Tonight, in the last of our five-part series on the defense of the United States, Walter Cronkite has made a special trip to the Soviet Union to bring back this report on America's greatest adversary, the Russians.
The Soviet Union has made it plain that they not only believe that a nuclear war is survivable, they believe that it is winnable. They have told us where they're going over and over again. They have told us that their goal is the Marxian philosophy of world revolution and a single one-world communist state, and that they're dedicated to that. Their statement about morality is that nothing is immoral if it furthers their cause, which means they can resort to lying or stealing or even murder. Our friends and allies no longer feel they can depend on us, no longer trust us, and the Soviet Union has shown its contempt for us and how much it knows it now outpowers us militarily. It is time for us to start a build-up, and it is time for us to build that to the point that no other nation on this earth will ever dare raise a hand against us, and in this way we will preserve world peace.
As one who has witnessed the horror and the lingering sadness of war, as one who knows that another war could utterly destroy this civilization, I wish I could say tonight that a lasting peace is in sight.
Those the words of an earlier American president, Dwight David Eisenhower. It was a message heard not only in the United States, but also here in Moscow, 20 years ago, in the midst of the Cold War. If you listen carefully to the voices coming out of the Kremlin and the White House today, it's clear that nothing much has changed. A lasting peace between the Soviet Union and the United States is no closer. Instead, angry words about American warmongering and Soviet threats and dire intentions. Well, who are these Russians? What are their intentions? What is there to fear? We came to Moscow looking for some answers and to look at how the world looks from here.
Want to play? Oh, Joan, I'd love to, but not right now.
There's no good time for a headache. But the worst time is when headache pain keeps you out of the fun. So this, too, is the season for Bayer Aspirin, 100% pure pain reliever. Bayer has relieved millions of headaches without stomach upset. Bayer Aspirin, 100% pure pain reliever, and nothing more, because nothing else is needed.
Would you like to play? Yes.
If your headache is too big for Bayer, see your doctor.
America needs to find oil in reliable places, at home and in other places we can count on, such as the British and Norwegian waters of the North Sea. Here, Conoco has spent hundreds of millions of dollars and pioneered new technology. Beneath these stormy seas, we're finding and producing oil that helps America. Conoco. This year, we're spending nearly $3 billion on energy.
A winter night somewhere in the Soviet Union. Two men, Russian soldiers, carrying the code books that will either start a nuclear war or prevent one. It's an exercise, just an exercise, a war game that calculates how fast the missiles could be fired. We practice it, the Russians practice it. This is the Russian version. What if the United States tried to wipe out the Soviet Union's land-based missiles in an American first strike? What if the United States decided that a limited nuclear war was not unthinkable?
There is now in the United States some sort of the propaganda of the possibility of such a war. And I think it's very dangerous because there cannot be nuclear war.
General Mikhail Milstein, a member of the GRU, Soviet military intelligence, and a leading officer in the Soviet Army for almost 40 years.
There is a great propaganda about the possible first strike against land-based missiles of the United States that the Soviet Union, they say, planning such a nuclear strike. Well, that's all just a very dangerous way of military thinking, because it leads, and they are trying to persuade people that the nuclear war is possible. No, the nuclear war is impossible.
But isn't it true that through the last few years, the Soviet Union has been developing these missiles at a much faster rate than the United States?
Categorically, my answer is categorically not. The United States had in the beginning Polaris A1, then Polaris, if we're speaking about Navy forces, then Polaris A2, then Polaris A3, it is MRV, then Poseidon with MIRV system, then Trident system already is going on. In the land-based missiles, they have Minuteman I and Titan, then Minuteman II, then Minuteman III.
Milstein argued the Russians have been playing catch-up ball with us from the beginning. And what's more, we're not their only problem.
We have to take into consideration the United States. We have to take, unfortunately, China possibilities, nuclear possibilities. We have to take French and British nuclear forces. We have to take into consideration NATO countries. There is only one threat to the United States. It's from the Soviet Union, if it is a threat.
The Soviet threat. 3 words that have shaped for decades the entire concept of the defense of the United States. We define ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, by what the Russians are building, are capable of building. And when it comes to the land-based missiles, the Russians are building more of them than any country in the world. They are the heart of their defense strategy and industry. These are not French pastry chefs. The piano and the accompanying pictures were provided by Soviet television. This is the first time they have been seen publicly in this country. We think you're looking at a missile design bureau, one of 3 in the Soviet Union that compete with each other like Ford and General Motors. For security reasons, they said, we could not be given any specific information. But we do know that what you are seeing is part of an enormous missile-building program. A program that took off after the Russians were forced to back down in the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. It was a turning point in their strategic planning, a humiliation they vowed they would never forget, and may account for the Russian resolve to produce so many of these missiles today. 3/4 of their strategic strength is focused here, which puts them ahead of us in numbers of land-based missiles and warheads, though behind us in other crucial measurements of nuclear strength.
I do not know America and the American psychology, but this is what I think.
Alexander Bovin, thought to be one of President Brezhnev's speechwriters and closer confidants. Bovin questions the American ability to accept Russian achievements.
Знаете, мистер Кранкайт, я, к сожалению, не так хорошо знаю Америку.
I believe the Americans want to be first in everything. In arms, in many other things. And the time has come now when we are equal. And the very fact that the Soviet Union is on the same level as the United States, psychologically, I think, to many Americans, well, they think they are lagging behind just because we are equal. I'm trying to explain this psychologically. Equality to Americans is already a sort of sign of falling back, of lagging behind. And I don't think the Americans were psychologically prepared to accept our equality, this parity. If we were to talk to American generals, they all agree that there's an approximate parity. For 7 years, we worked together on SALT II. We turned it this way and that way, and hundreds of Americans took part in working out SALT II. We weighed and counterweighed, and weighed again and over again, your arms, our arms. Seemed that everything was taken into account. And what happened? Who has refused to ratify this treaty? Unfortunately, it is the United States. If this SALT II was signed, ratified, we would be already talking about SALT III, and we would be cutting down our armaments already. So, where is the logic? You say we are building up arms, and yet you refuse a minimal agreement that would curtail the buildup of arms. We have never violated even agreements that were not signed. We cannot understand this.
Is there an understanding among the Soviet people that another round of arms buildup must mean inevitably a delay in achieving a higher standard of living, in material things particularly?
Of course there's that understanding. We understand it perfectly. We know how much a rocket costs. 100 hospitals could be built for the cost of 1 rocket.
Speaking of equality, is there a feeling here that the Soviet economy can afford, as well as the U.S. economy, this next round of the arms race which seems to be imminent?
Mr. Cronkite, where the question is of life and death, we can stand anything.
Defense of the motherland. That's the liturgy young soldiers watching World War II films study over and over again. Our country is burning, the song goes. One more victory is what we need to secure our land. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of reminders around Moscow of what the Russians call the Great Patriotic War. This is one of the most striking, a 20-foot-high sculpture in steel representing a tank trap, the furthest advance of the Nazis toward Moscow in 1941, right here, just 12 miles from the center of the city. Across the Moscow River, over the towering walls of the Kremlin and beyond the Grand Palace and gold-domed churches of the Tsars, there burns an eternal flame commemorating the 20 million Russians killed from 1941 to 1945. On a Sunday afternoon, as many as 3,000 persons an hour pay their respects. For some of them, one man observed, World War II was only yesterday. The Nazi banners taken by the Russians when they marched through Berlin hang now in the Red Army Museum, beside the blood-soaked identity cards of young boys, soldiers who gave their lives to the party and motherland. National suffering is framed in one display after another. This woman lost her 9 sons in war. Russians do not hesitate to remind you that our losses in the Second World War hardly compare to the pain and devastation they experienced. America, your tour guide will tell you, has never been invaded. And if you add up all of the Americans killed in all of the wars we have fought in our history, it doesn't amount to a fraction of the Russian sacrifice in World War II. The moral to the Russians of this story is simple. We must arm ourselves now to protect ourselves in the future. In one corner of the museum, patriotism and politics come together in a room reserved for the wreckage of Gary Francis Powers' U-2, shot down over Russian territory in 1960. It's a thin line between defense of the motherland and the political education given a young pioneer, a schoolboy on his way to party membership and proper military training. There are more than 3.5 million men in the Russian armed forces. We have a little more than 2 million men in voluntary service. Twice a year, the Soviets draft all their 18-year-old men in public celebrations around the country. The speeches go something like this. Military service is not easy, but high and important is this peaceful work. The service is compulsory for 2 years, and while the size and training of their military look impressive, the looks can be deceiving. The Russians have the largest submarine fleet in the world, but their submarines are plagued by ports that are frozen in most of the year, and it's very difficult for them to get from those ports into the open seas without being detected. The Soviet Navy is currently being modernized and expanded. The Reagan administration's calling that a major threat to our security. But only 10% of these ships are ever actually out at sea, and even then they are not training. Because they tend to break down, they spend most of their time at anchor. The training in the Army looks good too, but it doesn't show you any of the 500,000 men who are trained as border guards or construction workers. They're not very glamorous looking. You don't see many Muslim or Central Asian faces here either. Ethnic minority groups in the Soviet Union rarely get this kind of training. Most of them don't even speak Russian. Yet they make up in numbers almost half of the Red Army. And when 85,000 Russian soldiers swept into Afghanistan, they found out, like the Americans did in Vietnam, that much of their training didn't prepare them for the war they were faced with. Their weapons didn't work well. The terrain was unfamiliar, and so a year and a half later, the war in Afghanistan drags on. The Russian soldier is not 10 feet tall. He may look victorious on Soviet television, but the view from Moscow, even Russian diplomats concede, is that military assistance to their friendly neighbor in Afghanistan is costing them much more than they bargained for. At the same time, Afghanistan has renewed our fears about Moscow's influence in other capitals around the world. Where will the Russians hit next? Which new war of national liberation will find support in the Kremlin? Vitaly Zhirkin, deputy director of the Institute for the United States and Canada, offered what is commonly called the party line.
Officially recognized policy of the Soviet Union, proclaimed many times, is that the Soviet Union is against exporting revolution or counter-revolution. And from this point of view, we consider that it is impossible to implant, so to say, revolution in some other country. But really it is a fact, and we should frankly and openly recognize it, that we are in sympathy with the forces of, which I would call forces of social change or national liberation movement.
Are you involved in the nationalist liberation movement in El Salvador?
No, it was categorically stated that the Soviet Union does not provide any assistance to the national liberation movement in El Salvador.
Этот вопрос не так простой, как вам кажется.
And I hope you don't think that the revolution in Nicaragua was made by the Soviet Union. And if you think the revolution in Ethiopia was begun by the Soviet Union, you're wrong. When people have inhuman conditions for work, they begin to fight. They begin to war. It begins because of internal affairs. But another question arises here. Take Angola in Africa, for example. They asked for help. They haven't got modern arms. They haven't got professional soldiers. So they asked for help. They asked Cuba for help. Well, don't the Americans help their allies? Well, of course they do. That is the complexity of the situation. Suppose there was an uprising in South Africa, just let's suppose. And those blacks that are being subordinated and suppressed, what if they asked for help? Well, we are a civilized people. We are against apartheid. What would we say? No, we will not help you? Of course not.
How do you look upon the statements of President Reagan and Secretary Haig regarding the morality of the Soviet leadership?
I think that it is completely unacceptable and outrageously unacceptable way of dealing with another big nation. It is offensive. It was accepted by the Soviet people as an insult, and I consider that it is such.
CBS Reports will continue. Whirlpool is about to show you something in appliance quality you may never have seen before. A refrigerator that monitors itself to help protect your food. A microwave oven that uses a built-in computer to simplify your cooking. A dishwasher you can program to start hours later. And a laundry pair with electronic controls for today's fabrics. Whirlpool has created its first family of appliances with solid state to give you the quality of tomorrow's technology today.
Like millions of people across the nation, Kathy switched from Scope to Listermint because Listermint is better. She told her brother Larry.
Of course I switched to Listermint because clinical tests prove no leading mint mouthwash works better or keeps breath fresher longer.
Larry told his friend John.
You bet I switched, because Listermint tastes as good as it works. Now just watch how I can tell.
Switch to Listermint or try Listermint Cinnamon. They taste as good as they work.
Hello, I'm Walter Cronkite. For the past few months, I've been out looking at this world of ours, a world in which robots are making more robots while living species face extinction, and where man is reaching far into the past to discover the future. It's quite an adventure, and it's my new assignment, the universe.
This is CBS.
What's the matter, kid? First night jitters.
This night will be unforgettable.
The feeling's so agreeable.
It seems like nothing's impossible.
Oh my gosh.
This night is unmistakably steak and ale.
Hospitable. Impeccable.
Delectable.
Incredible. How am I doing, fellas?
This night is unmistakably steak and ale.
The fight over auto racing continues in White House. Details at 10 o'clock.
Leaving. Grom. Agom.
Propaganda is a Soviet art form. Warsaw Pact maneuvers are produced as smoothly as an American television commercial. The product is world socialism. The strategy is military power. The advertising agency is TASS. From here, the official Soviet view of events is marketed worldwide. To Kabul in Afghanistan, to Hanoi, Paris and Peking, to Ulaanbaatar in Outer Mongolia. 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. General Director Sergei Losev is in charge of the Soviet Union's official news agency.
We in the States taking the American service across, the CBS, accept that as the Soviet word on things. How do you get that word? Is it official in the sense that you, as editorial director, and the editorial directors already know the party and government line, and therefore everything that is written is assumed to reflect that line? Is that how it's done?
Our correspondents and our editorial staff, of course, they know they write and file their stories according to their convictions.
Mr. Losev was no more forthcoming in response to our other questions. And that's the problem for a Western journalist reporting from Moscow. Accurate information is almost impossible to come by. When I was a reporter for the United Press here in 1946, a resourceful colleague of mine dropped some questions in a Kremlin mailbox addressed to Comrade Stalin. A few days later, he got some answers. It didn't work for me when I tried it, but I thought I'd give President Brezhnev a chance to change my luck. Kevin Close is a journalist who's been here for 4 years for the Washington Post. He lives in one of the 2 foreigners' compounds in Moscow that isolate Western reporters and diplomats from ordinary Russians. Close was reprimanded by the Foreign Ministry not long ago for reporting what they considered an unflattering view of the Soviet Union.
The Afghan Foreign Minister Shah Mohammed Dost.
Down the street, the London Times correspondent Michael Binion works out of a 3-room flat. Binion is one of the more respected European correspondents. He first came to the Soviet Union in 1967. He settled in Moscow to write for the Times in 1978. This is Tony Austin's second hitch. He was here to cover Khrushchev in 1958 and 1959 for the United Press. He returned 2 years ago as correspondent for the New York Times. When you want to know what's going on in the Soviet Union, you do what journalists always do here. You share information. What about the strength of the economy? Let's take that up as a point.
I think in the last 10 or 15 years, particularly if one could say in the Brezhnev era, they have had a steady rise in standards of living, fairly small each year, but a rise. And they have had a taste of the good life. One of the things that détente has done, it has brought in a lot more tourists. It has opened up visions of what's possible overseas. And I think the fact that the radios weren't jammed for quite a long time, foreign broadcasts to this country, means that people do know that their life is better overseas. And the consumerism, particularly among the young generation, is quite a strong force. And once this genie has got out of the bottle, it's very difficult for them to put back. And I think they're having a lot of problems satisfying the demand for food. I mean, as one Soviet official said to me, our leaders don't listen when 40,000 people say something, but when 40 million people say the same thing, then they listen. And 40 million people now are complaining that food isn't good enough and there isn't enough and that there's not enough consumer goods available.
How do they complain in this controlled society?
Well, speaking to Russians, I've asked that question over and over again and listened to them as we all have. You know, who do they blame? There is never blame against the sort of political system. The blame has to do with, well, the bureaucracy or the guys who drive the trucks who are not bringing the food in, who are dealing on the side.
Or a local manager.
It goes on and it goes on and it goes on, the grumbling, the complaints, and these guys up there, they live much better. They have their own channels of supply and they get the meat when we can't find it in the stores and we stand in line for hours, there's nothing. But the end of it all is always, well, comrades, well, Tavarishi, you know, times are dangerous. The Americans are ringing us with bases, and we've got to tighten our belts and buckle up because the motherland is, the defense of the motherland is the most important thing there is. And the implicit argument is we don't have all these things that we want because we've got to put all our, so much of our resources into armaments and missiles. We don't want to do that, but we have to.
Do you get any sense at all, looking at it from both sides, living here, studying the Russians, making it your job to do that there's any possibility that the United States could be wrong in its attitude?
I don't think there's any question, but this is an expansionist power. It's now exceedingly well armed. It has its internal economic problems, which we've been talking about. It has demographic problems. It has social problems, which have to do with all sorts of things that relate to an industrial society. But I don't think there's any question that this leadership, not just the Brezhnev leadership, but the impulses of what leads this country are impulses towards expansion.
The Russians have always been unable to resist targets of opportunity, where they see a target of opportunity.
What really works in this country are their weapons. What really has worked quite well so far is the role that they have assumed for themselves as being in the vanguard of the so-called national liberation movement. It gives them legitimacy. It gives them something to live for, to plan for, to work for. What else is there? The economy is stagnant. The economy is in bad need of basic reform, and these men can't face that kind of basic reform. Khrushchev tried it and was removed for that reason because it threatens the entire bureaucracy.
If you look at the world from Moscow, it looks very black. There are not many successes on the foreign policy scene. They've got China, which is hostile and shows no signs of making any agreement with the Soviet Union, no signs of normalizing relations. And they have China being ever more friendly with Western Europe and with the United States, as they call it, the 16th member of the NATO alliance. They have problems on their southern flank with Afghanistan. Iran is in turmoil and they don't know which way it's going to go. They've got this terrible, endless, ongoing crisis in Poland. I think also their foreign policy successes, so-called, really aren't that remarkable in themselves. Look at their successes, say, in Africa. Ethiopia isn't really that much of a strategic gain. Angola is costing them a lot of money, and so is Mozambique, and I don't think it's really very much use to them. I don't think, in fact, they've got many noticeable successes to chalk up, and they do feel very much driven into a corner with their backs to the wall at the moment.
And let me ask this also. From an ideological standpoint, can you really fault them for supporting nationalist movements elsewhere. Isn't that really what their whole ideology is about?
Right, except I don't believe they believe in their ideology in their heart of hearts. I think this ideological faith in socialism and communism is dead. I think ideology is now an instrument that they use to program their policy. I mean, I don't see anyone here really living socialism as a way of life.
Is that dead among the people, too?
I think it's dead as a doornail.
I think there's an important point here, and this ties in with what we were saying about ideology, that once the Russians see a left-wing revolution in progress, or the chance of some left-wing guerrilla left-wing movement gaining power, they feel obliged to intervene. They feel they've got to establish their credentials. They've got to show themselves as the standard bearers of communism, because really that's what it's all about. They've got to show that the world can depend on them. And this very often gets them into situations which they would rather not be in. I think this is very true of Afghanistan.
How dangerous is the situation right now as regards the military buildup, and particularly the nuclear arms race?
The the exterior propaganda is that the Soviet Union would never strike on its own. It would only fight a defensive war and so forth. But I think that if you look at the military doctrine, which soldiers and officers are taught, is something that goes roughly like this: we'll be in Paris in 3 days. Anytime when you have two such enormously powerful countries not talking to each other, things are very dangerous. They are dangerous.
You know, to what degree the situation is made more dangerous when we have 10,000 warheads rather than 5,000 warheads, and they have 9,000 warheads rather than 4,000 warheads. I don't know. What do you think, Walter? Is there some mathematical factor that makes huge numbers more dangerous when they're even more huge?
Well, we're into the overkill question, which I think we've been facing.
But we reached overkill years and years ago.
I think there's an important point about Soviet psychology here, and that is the worry that they have not only in the military sector and the military sphere, but in almost every aspect of life, that they're not as good as the West. And whatever they do, it's not going to be as good. And that therefore they don't actually believe that they are superior, even when a sort of objective analysis of what they've got on the ground would say they are. They don't believe that they're better off, that they're stronger, until they hear the West saying it. They don't believe that they're stronger. They don't even believe that they've got parity until the West says, you are now superior. Then they feel secure.
Well, they must feel very secure today, then. That's all they've been hearing for 6 months or a year.
Yes and no, because they always feel that America is going to pull a rabbit out of the hat, which they can't do.
Are they capable of launching a preemptive strike, a first strike?
You mean psychologically?
No, psychologically, yes.
I don't think they contemplate a preemptive first strike. I think that does take you into the area of madness, of logicians figuring everything out to the last decimal point and saying, well, okay, now we have enough margin of safety, we can do it. I think that's in the realm of fantasy. I don't think they think in those terms. I think they think in other terms. I think there is that historic Russian sense of insecurity and the West being clever, better than they, devilish clever, these Americans and the Westerners. And yet I also think that's balanced by a kind of a rough Russian self-confidence. They know they have done tremendous things in the past, and they can do tremendous things in the future. They know that their military machine is superb.
Well, besides Soviet strength, looking at other facets of Soviet weakness, how strong are their alliances in Eastern Europe?
Well, their major problem, of course, is Poland. That threatens, it doesn't threaten the alliance in the formal sense, but it threatens it in the most difficult political sense for them, because Hungary, Czechoslovakia, East Germany are watching what is happening in Poland with enormous interest, and it's very difficult for the Soviets sitting here who already let the situation get out of their control almost completely. It's very difficult for them now to go back and try to get the horses back in the barn. But they, from their point of view, they absolutely must to maintain the kind of regimentation of political life which is necessary to the way the alliance and to the way the East Bloc functions.
Popular reaction is those lazy Poles need to be taught a lesson. And popular reaction says, well, why don't they work? We're giving them all this money. We too have economic problems. Why should they be better off than us? Why should they eat more meat, which they do, than the average Russian does?
If it came right down to it, I think they would move, they would use muscle to retain total control, because I think that in the end, total control is the only thing that this regime really understands, the only thing that they think makes their system work.
Let me get to a kind of a baseline question. Can we trust the Russians?
Well, I think we can trust them to observe a formal agreement. I think their record on agreements is pretty good, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Yeah, wouldn't you say?
It seems so to me.
As for trusting them to live up to a certain code of behavior, as Haig puts it in the world, and of abstaining from hitting targets of opportunity, I don't think we can trust them on that.
But I think we have to understand what are their rules. They play by their rules, and they expect us to play by ours. And these rules are just different. I mean, I think there's an interesting point where I think it was President Reagan said, well, look at the words. In fact, I believe he said it to you. Look at their words. What do they actually say? It's true, they don't do what they actually say, but they never have done.
During the campaign, our presidential campaign, there was talk among the eventual winners of gaining superiority in arms. Can we, do you think, from what you know of the strength of both nations, ever outspend the Soviet in this area?
The record is that we have not been outspending them for the past 10 or 15 years as a percentage of the budget. The fact is because our economy is larger than theirs, we could indeed outspend them.
I don't know really that you can buy peace, though, or buy better understanding simply by spending more and more on arms. Of course, that sounds a very Soviet answer, but I think that's how it looks from here.
You messed up.
But, Mom, I'm going to clean this mess with this dry bleach.
That's just it. That dry bleach won't clean your pink blouse like Clorox 2.
Clorox 2?
It's best for colors.
But this ketchup.
That's why Clorox 2 is best. Its extra strength gets out tough stains better than other dry bleaches. Come on.
Extra strength Clorox 2 beats the rest at cleaning colors the best.
From messed up to cleaned up.
Yep. Clorox 2 puts me in the pink again.
Oh.
Hey, what's up?
T1000.
What's a T1000?
The new penny pincher from Pontiac.
Looks great. What's it got?
It's got a lot. 4-cylinder engine, reclining front bucket seats, rack and pinion steering, 4-speed manual transmission, front disc brakes, and lots of room.
Wow. What's the price?
The price is nice. $53.58.
Wow. That is a penny pincher.
CT1000 at your Pontiac dealer now.
Now that's greenish blue.
No, dear, that's bluish green.
3 colors ago was bluish green.
Why don't we all cool off with some country time?
Emma, tastes like the good old-fashioned lemonade you used to make.
It does. Not too tart, not too sweet. You're agreeing.
Oh.
Natural lemon flavor from real lemons goes into Country Time lemonade flavored drink.
There's the color.
Country time, country time. Tastes like that good old-fashioned lemonade.
Real old-fashioned coffee aroma.
Old-fashioned? Mom, this is new improved mellow roast.
New? But it smells just like the coffee my mother used to make.
That's because new mellow roast has more rich aroma than before and a new full-bodied taste.
But smooth tasting like my mother's.
You like new mellow roast, huh, Mom?
New for you, dear. For me, just plain old-fashioned delicious.
New Mellow Roast coffee and grain beverage, improved for even more old-fashioned coffee taste and aroma.
What we know about the Soviets and what they know about us form our perceptions of each other. The perception of power or misperception is the most dangerous part of our relationship. Take Red Square on November 7th. You can see in this film an awesome commitment to tanks and rocket launchers. Or you can see a typical military parade that lasts about 20 minutes. Take your pick. This is also the annual occasion for Kremlin watchers to interpret any changes in the party leadership.
Who stands next to whom up there on Lenin's mausoleum is supposed to give us a clue as to who's in charge around here. The closer you stand to Brezhnev, the more powerful you are. To Brezhnev's right is Dmitry Ustinov, age 72, defense minister since 1976, named by Stalin in World War II as the People's Commissar of Armaments, the man responsible for the success of Sputnik. Brezhnev, the president, 74 years old, and the man behind the movement to oust Khrushchev. Mikhail Suslov, 78, the party ideologue. Andrei P. Korolenko, 74, the heir apparent. In one picture, the complexity of Soviet strength and Soviet weakness. An aging leadership that has bought its nation's security, bought power and fear and respect in the world at the expense of the Russian people's well-being. That's our perception. What about the Russian perception?
Roy Medvedev has never been outside of the Soviet Union. He's an historian, a writer. He also is what Soviets would call a dissident. His best-known work, Let History Judge, was one of the earliest and most detailed domestic exposures of Stalin's crimes. He lives in a small apartment 45 minutes from the Kremlin.
I have to say first that Soviet people generally don't know their leadership. If you ask the average Russian what type of a man Korolenko is, he will say, I don't know. He also doesn't know what kind of a man Suslov is. He also doesn't know who Brezhnev's wife is, or Brezhnev's daughter. Good people or bad people, he doesn't know. Smart or stupid. He knows that they are old, that they are experienced. He knows that they want the Soviet Union to be strong. As old people, he knows that they want a quiet, peaceful life. They don't want that many crises in the world. They don't want to send a division into Poland. But they will do it, so that they will stay at the head of their government.
Well, is the sole driving force of this leadership to remain in power?
Yes.
Why do they consider that this aggression in the world is necessary to stay in power?
Their psychology is such that what we consider aggressive, they consider defensive. They consider that the Americans are aggressive, and they are only defending themselves against the Americans.
Whatever the psychology, neither side intends to be unprepared.
Are you ready for war?
I certainly am.
Right now?
That's right.
Do you think the American people are?
I don't know.
To these Americans, ready for war means ready for the Russians. They're fighter pilots. Their mission, know thine enemy.
If you see something inside of 10 miles, give us an advisory call. If you can lock him up and shoot him in the face, I want you to do that, okay? Keep in mind that
they've come to Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas to train in an exercise called Red Flag.
Fire off name 7 at him.
In a morning briefing, they discuss, analyze, and memorize Soviet tactics and Soviet weapons. And they face the opposition, not Russians, but the best fighter pilots in the American Air Force, masquerading as Russians, flying in aircraft with Warsaw Pact camouflage and bright red Soviet identification. It isn't just flying, though. To know your enemy, you have to know how he thinks, how he behaves, what he believes.
Soviet fighter pilot is a man who has been trained to dislike Americans and to fight and die for Mother Russia if necessary. For a military officer to attain success and to advance in his career, he will become a member of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is pervaded by communism. It pervades everything in Soviet society. It starts from childhood, and it goes on through the death of the individual at the end of his natural life.
Perceptions or misperceptions. The Air Force created the Red Flag exercise to train against Soviet aggression. The Soviet Union sees Red Flag as proof of American aggression. We look at each other in the same mirror, but each side sees what it wants to see.
There cannot be exact parity. I mean, tank by tank, man by man, weapon by weapon, but there is, as we call it, asymmetrical parity. because in one field, the United States and NATO is much ahead of the Soviet Union and Warsaw Treaty. In some field, the Soviet Union and Warsaw Treaty is quite ahead. Some people in the United States, I mean, very influential people, they don't agree with parity. And they never agreed with this, with parity. They are trying to get just a military superiority. It is impossible to get superiority. It is impossible for the United States or for the Soviet Union or for any countries. It only leads to the arms race, and I said it before, it's very dangerous.
The United States has enough arms to destroy us 20 to 30 times. That makes us nervous. I understand the Americans are nervous too, because we too have enough arms. But on the other hand, the Americans sometimes act in a way that violates our political interests. Take the situation in the Middle East, in the Persian Gulf area. Your buildup of American force and the attempt to oust us out of the process of regulating the situation in the Middle East, this worries us. Take the Far East. This playing up to China makes us worried, because we have a common border with China, and we look upon that with anxiety. But what if instead of Canada, you had China on your border, and instead of Mexico, the nations of the Warsaw Treaty? The Americans would be anxious too.
Doesn't the United States have reason to be concerned about the Soviet in Afghanistan? After all, it is a pathway to a vital area in our interest, the Persian Gulf.
I can understand that. I understand the fact that you're worried about your oil supplies. But I think in order to ensure the supply of oil, no 5 or 15 aircraft carriers will solve the problem. I feel that the Americans are constantly trying to use force, brute force. I understand that the Afghan problem worries you, but I don't see, well, do you really believe that we will go from Afghanistan through Pakistan to the Indian Ocean? This is a political fantasy. I understand, of course, the Afghan problem. It worries us too. And we will be solving this problem. Like all fat people, I am an optimist.
Why is the Polish situation so threatening to the Soviet Union?
Вы знаете, потому что, само положение Польши геостратегическое.
Because the situation in Poland is a strategic situation. It plays a big role in the Warsaw Pact. If you look at the map, you'll see. We consider Poland a friendly nation, but we look at everything that goes on there now with anxiety. Both, well, there is an economic crisis, and as a result now there is a political crisis. We hope, we continue to hope, that the Poles will themselves solve their own problems.
Predicting what the Russians would do next is a preoccupation along Embassy Road. At Spaso House, the American ambassador's residence, Soviet and American diplomats meet occasionally in small receptions. But communication these days, to use the diplomatic expression, is strained. Strained at every level. On this occasion, word came that the United States had canceled the visa of a Soviet spokesman to keep him off American television, because American officials cannot appear on Soviet television. Tit for tat. The State Department calls this reciprocity. The Soviets call it deliberately creating tension with the Soviet Union. Another matter of perceptions. Our acting ambassador, Jack Matlock, thinks the Reagan administration has finally found the right way to deal with the Russians.
Really, reciprocity means nothing more than we expect the same treatment that we give. It's important to us to establish a reputation that, well, to put it bluntly, that we won't accept the short end of a stick, even if it's a small stick.
What about their perception of America? How accurate is it?
Well, I think on the policy-making level, I would say that there are some major misconceptions. Not that they don't have a lot of facts. They have an enormous range of facts about us. But when it comes to really understanding how we think, how we make decisions, how our political system really works, I think they often misunderstand it.
In going into Afghanistan, Do the Soviet people have any understanding as to the nature of the American reaction, the wheat embargo and the embargo on the Olympics?
The Soviet people know that America answered with these embargoes and boycotts, but they believed, as it is written in the papers, they believe what they hear from the Soviet government, that America is doing the wrong thing and the Soviet Union is doing the right thing. They believe as they are told to believe. This is the heritage of our country. They have never had democracy. They know no other way. If you have never eaten meat, you don't know how it tastes.
Shortly after we left Medvedev's home, the KGB, the secret police, arrived, searched his apartment, and questioned him at length. 3 weeks later, through information passed to us from London, we were informed that all of Medvedev's neighbors, as a result of our interview with him, had been interrogated by the KGB and the local militia.
What is this, Dad? It looks funny.
Trust me, it's terrific. A few Fritos corn chips, huh?
Munch a bunch of munch a bunch of munch a bunch of munch a bunch of Fritos go with lunch.
Nothing gives your old lunch new life like Fritos brand corn chips. So full of munchy corn taste.
Munch a bunch of munch a bunch, munch a bunch of munch a bunch, munch a bunch of Fritos go with lunch.
Fritos corn chips make lunch munch better.
Touch. Now Canon gives it a new meaning with a One Touch, the Canon NP120 copier. There isn't even a power switch. Just touch and copying begins instantly. You get 12 copies a minute on plain paper, without wasted time or energy. The low-cost Canon NP120, the One Touch. Turning it off is even simpler. No touch. Call toll-free for information, or contact your Canon dealer.
Working hands of America, let the healing begin.
Working hands, roughen up your skin. Vaseline Intensive Care lets the healing begin.
Vaseline Intensive Care Lotion helps heal roughness, dryness.
Helps heal tightness, flaking.
Lets the healing begin in seconds.
Yeah, Vaseline Intensive Care lets the healing begin.
You're at the wheel of America's most popular sports car, Mustang.
Gonna drive some hot stuff, baby, this evening. Gonna drive my Mustang, baby, tonight.
Mustang. Engineered for seat-of-the-pants response with rack and pinion steering. Mustang, a car that bites when cornered. Precision-tuned. Mustang turns high mileage into Mustang. From the world of better ideas at Ford.
I think we have to assume some rationale behind the Soviets' enormous allocation of resources to the military at the expense of other basic human needs. Now, we have a map that is designed to show the current situation, and red appropriately covers the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact. The pink coloration identifies other countries allied or closely aligned with the Soviets. This Soviet activity, which is unchallenged in recent years by the United States, has led to Soviet gains. And
you can get yourself pretty frightened looking at all of the administration's maps and charts of Soviet aggression and military spending. But like so many of our perceptions of the Soviet Union, it tells you only half the story, the half the administration uses to press its case for higher and higher defense budgets. This is the other half of the story. Since 1960, Soviet influence around the world actually has declined. Their so-called gains, like Afghanistan and Angola, take on a different perspective, particularly when they're measured against losses, like Egypt and China. As for the military spending, the figures also are misleading. Our two systems, our two economies, are so different that to compare the costs of tanks and rocket launchers is just about as meaningful as comparing the costs of a college education. So we're back to our original questions. Who are these Russians? What are their intentions? No one can say with certainty. But if their perception of America is as flawed as we believe it is, then our perceptions of the Soviet Union just could be flawed too. In the absence of any real dialogue, the same old fears and doubts continue to dominate our relationship. And incidentally, those questions I sent to President Brezhnev, I never got an answer.
We end this series as we began it, in the heartland of America, in a world which can destroy itself in less time than Lincoln took to deliver the Gettysburg Address. We have entered an age of conventional wisdom about very unconventional weapons of war, and we're heading toward the largest military buildup in this nation's history with few questions asked. All of us as Americans want our defenses to be strong and secure. We face a dangerous decade and a resolute enemy. But will we make ourselves stronger by unquestioning faith in new weapons technology? Will our European alliance be strengthened by a strategy that might force us to destroy Europe in order to save it? Will we increase our national security by insisting there is a way to fight a limited nuclear war without mutual destruction? We hope these broadcasts have helped stimulate this debate, for on it may rest our survival. For CBS Reports, Dan Rather. Good night.
Friday night on Dallas.
You know, they're just squeezing you out to make a place for Bobby.
I want you to understand one thing, Sugar. Bobby's riding high right now. It's only a matter of time and place before I put a burr under his saddle.
Just how far will JR go to sabotage Bobby's control of Huey North? An explosive Dallas Friday.
The CBS Evening News is covering high interest rates, the high cost of housing, and how to beat them. I'll have a report on the CBS Evening News tomorrow.
Robert Mitchum as Philip Marlowe, private eye, tracking a murder and sideswiped by two sexy sisters.
You're cute.
The Big Sleep, Saturday at 9, 8 Central and Mountain.
Doctor says old Charlie got a problem with his lungs.
What?
Thinks he got it working around asbestos in a shipyard.
Hey, Grandpa used to work in a shipyard.
Oh, that was 30 years ago. Your grandfather was never sick a day in his life. Maybe Grandpa's not sick.
But he's not out of danger.
Like millions of workers in parts of the construction, mining, shipbuilding, and auto industries, Grandpa was exposed to asbestos dust. Sometimes it takes 30 years or more for asbestos-related diseases like lung cancer to show.
Grandpa's stubborn.
Now, what'll we tell him?
What did the doctor tell Charlie?
Doctor told Charlie that asbestos is serious business, and Charlie was smart for coming in.
Asbestos is serious business. If you smoke, you can make things worse. So stop and get prompt medical treatment for respiratory illness.
I was just talking to Charlie.
This is CBS.
Who will President Reagan name to replace retiring Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart? The story coming up next on Eyewitness News.
Alabama, the beautiful, your peaceful river so clean and deep, where the paddle wheelers glide, and your marbled mansions with mirrored halls, echo of days gone by. In Alabama, the beautiful, just waiting here for you.
Isn't this a pretty sight? I really nail those weeds right in my crop with this rope wick and Roundup herbicide. Roundup, through a rope wick, keeps weeds like rhizome Johnson grass and many others in check for about $3 an acre. As a farmer, I love to nail those weeds. As a businessman, I like the cleaner, faster harvest.